So welcome back. So I'm looking at their solution right now, and like when you develop software, you can always make a solution without making the correct solution. And we're not there yet because they actually expect us in the solution to pass our values from strings to integer like I talked about. And we need to do that now. We need to convert it into integers instead of pretty much just being strings we're working with. And then they expect us to kind of switch them around. I'll do this in the next lesson because I have a few points when we're going to pass now. And we're going to use this way of passing right now, the int pass. There are other ways and we'll try those later on. But right now again, notice that when I put in 1 and 2, it ended up being 12 down here instead of 3. So let's start out by actually changing this first input, changing that name into being first input as text. And let me start out by showing you guys something pretty cool. You can actually right click this guy and rename him, and then he will be renamed all over the code. So notice when I do this, you'll actually notice that we have a name here, up here, we have one here, and we have one here. And because I've set it this way, I don't have to go and manually do it all the way down. I can just write as text and it'll rename it all the way through my actual code. How did I do that again? I right click and I say rename, or I press Control R twice, Control R, keep the control down and press R again, and then that's actually the shortcut, and I'll do as text here. So now I've kind of explained that my inputs are as text, and now I'll make the same one as a number here. So I'll just copy this line right here, and I'll say first input as number or as int. And instead of doing the control read line, I'll actually use the int pass that they just showed us in the example, and I'll pass my first input as text into an actual number. And let's just copy this down here. So now I have the two inputs and they've been passed, and instead of actually adding here as text, let's try now do it as number, because now it should actually work, right? First input as int, second input as int. So now I should actually have the right adding them together in the right way. So when I put in 1 here, enter, put in 2 here, now it should work, but it doesn't, still doesn't work. Why? Why don't it work? Go back to the code. I'll explain you why. Because the system is built, the .NET framework and the C# language is built so it says when I start out with a string, anything after the plus will also be converted into a string automatically. So it'll be the same as doing actually a toString here. I'll just convert it into a string for you. So what we need to do to make it actually being a mathematical term before it's being converted into a string is actually add a couple of parentheses here. Because what happens now is, before I convert it, if these guys are both integers or any kind of number, I'll add them together. This will now convert into a plus sign, a real plus sign, instead of just merging two strings together. So now it'll say, this is a string, I'm going to add that string to this string. But before I do that, I'll add these two numbers together like if they were two real numbers. Let's try and run this and see what actually happens. Do the first number again, the second number, and now it actually says 3, right? So now we have a real program running and everything. We can now swap the numbers, but I want to just talk a bit more about the parsing before we do in the next lesson.